Have you ever wondered how one small mistake can change the entire course of someone's life? This is the story of a young mother, Hannah. Homeless, starving, and clutching her baby to her chest, she believed the world had forgotten her. That is, until a stranger named Dominic crossed her path. He gave her food when she hadn't eaten in days. He gave her money when she thought all hope was gone. And most importantly, he gave her a promise to rescue her and her little child from a life of suffering. But sometimes, fate plays cruel tricks. The one thing Hannah needed to reach him slipped from her hands without her knowing. A single card, her only lifeline, lost on the rainy streets of Lagos. While Dominic sat waiting for her call, worried and restless, Hannah was on the other side of the city, desperate, crying, and completely unaware that her chance at salvation was already gone. Two souls connected by kindness, but torn apart by misfortune. One searching, one waiting, both on the edge of hope and despair. Will destiny bring them back together? Or will Hannah's chance at a better life vanish forever? Stay with me, because what happens next will break your heart, yet give you hope like never before. This is the story of Hannah, a struggling young mother, and Dominic, a billionaire. One had nothing, no food, no shelter, no comfort. The other had everything money could buy. But on one rainy morning in Lagos, their paths crossed in the most unexpected way. And what followed will break your heart. The morning was cold. Light rain drizzled steadily over the busy streets of Lagos. Cars splashed through puddles, people hurried past with umbrellas. At the corner of the road, Hannah stood, clutching her baby, Julia, against her chest. The little one was wrapped in a thin piece of cloth, her cries faint but full of pain. Her tiny face was wet and cold. Hannah had no jacket, no umbrella, no home to return to. Her slippers were worn out, her dress completely soaked. But she didn't move. She couldn't. Last night, she and Julia went to bed hungry, without even a spoonful of food. That's why today, despite the rain, Hannah stood by the roadside, desperate for help. She wasn't begging for herself. She could endure the hunger. But her baby, she couldn't watch her suffer again. People walked by. Some gave her a glance filled with pity, others turned away quickly. Nearby, two men whispered to each other. "Why is she standing in the rain like that?" one asked. "Probably faking it," the other replied. "People even rent babies these days to collect money." Hannah heard their cruel words, but stayed silent. She only wiped Julia's face and rocked her gently. Then, with a tired voice trembling with pain, she whispered, "Please, help me. Just some food for my baby." Julia's lips were dry. Her cries were getting weaker. Hannah held her tighter. "Don't cry, my child. Mommy will find food today. I promise." But Hannah didn't know that help was already on the way. Inside a black SUV not far from her, a man sat quietly at the back. His name was Dominic. Wealthy beyond imagination, he was the kind of man people stopped to look at whenever he passed. That morning, he was heading to an important business meeting, one that could change the future of his company. Traffic crawled, as usual in Lagos. Dominic leaned against the window, staring out absent-mindedly, until something caught his eye. A young woman. Standing in the rain. Holding a baby. The child was soaked, the mother exhausted. She didn't shout. She didn't chase after cars. She only stood there quietly, asking for help. Something stirred deep inside Dominic. This wasn't ordinary begging. This was raw suffering. "Stop the car," he told his driver. The driver hesitated. "Sir." "Stop," Dominic repeated firmly. The SUV pulled over. Dominic stepped out into the rain. His shoes sank into the wet ground, his expensive suit dampened, but he didn't care. He walked toward Hannah. Hannah, busy rocking Julia, didn't notice him until he stood right in front of her. She looked up, startled. A tall man with kind but serious eyes met her gaze. "Good morning," he said softly. Hannah gave a faint nod. "What's her name?" he asked, looking at the baby. Julia, Hannah replied quietly. Dominic bent slightly to see the child's face. Her lips trembled as she whimpered weakly. Has she eaten? He asked. Hannah shook her head. No, sir. Not since yesterday. And you? Have you eaten anything? She lowered her eyes. No, sir. But that's okay. I just want food for my baby. Dominic paused. He studied the mother and child, and then said gently, Come with me. Hannah froze. She had never spoken to a rich man before. Fear and doubt filled her mind. But when she looked into his eyes, there was no judgment, only compassion. She glanced down at Julia, shivering in her arms. Then, taking a deep breath, she nodded. The driver opened the car door. Hannah climbed in carefully, holding Julia close, sitting nervously on the edge of the seat. She avoided eye contact, focusing only on her baby. Dominic sat beside her, quiet but thoughtful. He handed her a small towel. Here, use this to dry the baby. Thank you, sir, she whispered, quickly wrapping Julia in it. What's your name? Dominic asked. Hannah, she said softly. And where is your home? Her voice broke. We don't have one, sir. We sleep on the street. Dominic simply nodded. All right. I'll take you somewhere safe. Hannah's eyes widened. Truly, sir? Yes. Somewhere warm and dry. You both need rest and food first. Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them quickly. God bless you, sir. Dominic didn't respond. He only looked out the window, his mind racing. He knew he was already late for his meeting, but when he glanced back at Hannah and Julia, weak, cold, and hungry, he made up his mind. Food first, he said quietly. The driver turned into a small restaurant. Dominic walked Hannah inside. He ordered hot rice, fried plantain, chicken, and warm milk for the baby. People stared, but Dominic didn't care. Hannah sat nervously, still holding Julia. When the food arrived, she looked at him. Sir, may I eat here? She asked timidly. Yes, Dominic nodded. Please, eat. Hannah bowed her head, fed Julia the warm milk first, and then slowly began eating. She ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in days, because she hadn't. Tears streamed down her face as she chewed. Dominic said nothing. He only watched. When she was done, she looked up at him. Thank you, sir. God bless you. Dominic leaned forward. Tell me, what happened? How did you end up like this? Hannah looked down at Julia and began to speak. My parents died when I was a child. I grew up in an orphanage in Ibadan. Life was hard. I worked anywhere I could, cleaning, cooking, washing, just to survive. Then, one day, I met Jacob, a taxi driver. He was kind. We fell in love. After a year, he promised we'd marry. When I got pregnant, I was scared, but he was happy. He told me he needed to travel to his home country to inform his family first, it was their tradition. He promised to return in a week. She paused, her voice breaking. But he never came back. His phone stopped working. His friends claimed they knew nothing. I lost my home. No job wanted a pregnant woman. So, I ended up on the streets. And now, Julia is all I have. Dominic's chest tightened. He looked at the little girl, sleeping peacefully at last, and then at Hannah, still young, but broken by life. He took a deep breath and made a silent vow. Her story will not end like this. Dominic pulled out some money, placing it gently on the table. Take this, he said firmly. It's for you and your baby, for now. Hannah's eyes widened as she stared at the money. Her hands trembled as she whispered, Sir, this is too much. I can't accept all of it. Dominic's gaze stayed on her. His voice was calm, steady. Take it, Hannah. You need this. She glanced down at Julia, still fast asleep in her arms, then slowly picked up the money and pressed it tightly to her chest. Bowing her head, she muttered, "Thank you, sir. May God bless you." Dominic gave a small nod and a faint smile. But when he checked his wristwatch, his eyes widened. He had already missed the start of his crucial meeting. His foreign business partners were probably waiting at his office by now. He stood abruptly. "I have an important meeting right now. It will run for about 3 hours. From his wallet, he pulled out a business card with his name and number printed on it. Handing it to her, he said, "Call me when I'm done. I'll come to you and take you both somewhere safe." Hannah received the card like it was the most precious gift she'd ever been given. She wanted to speak, to explain that she didn't even own a phone, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she just nodded. "Maybe I can pay someone to let me use their phone when the time comes," she thought quickly. Dominic gave her one last look. "I'll be waiting for your call." With that, he turned and left the restaurant. Hannah sat quietly, clutching Julia with one hand and the card with the other. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered inside her. After a few minutes, she folded the card neatly and tucked it into a tiny sewn pocket inside Julia's clothes so it wouldn't get lost. She patted the pocket to make sure it was secure, then stepped outside. But as she adjusted Julia's blanket, the card slipped out, falling silently onto the wet ground near the door. No one noticed. The rain had stopped, the sun peeking through the clouds. Hannah boarded a small bus and returned to the same street corner where Dominic had first seen her. She sat under a shop's awning, convinced the card was safe in Julia's clothes. When the time comes, I'll ask someone to call him, she thought. But the truth was, the card was gone. Hours later, Dominic finished his meeting. The deal had gone well, but instead of feeling relief, his heart was unsettled. He checked his phone, no missed calls. 5 hours had passed. He frowned, whispering to himself, why hasn't she called? Doubts crept in. Maybe she never planned to. Maybe she was just like the others who beg for a living. But then he remembered the tears in her eyes as she ate, the way she held her child as though the world was trying to take her away. He sighed deeply. I promised her safety, for that baby's sake. Why wouldn't she want that? Still no call. Dominic placed his phone down and tried to focus on work, but peace wouldn't come. Meanwhile, Hannah sat patiently in the shade, Julia resting on her chest. She waited, believing she still had Dominic's number. When lunchtime came, Dominic told his driver, "Take me back to the restaurant we went to this morning, the one where I met the woman and her child." The SUV rolled through the busy streets, but Dominic barely noticed. His mind replayed her face, her words, her tears. What if she tried to call but couldn't? What if something happened to her? When they reached the restaurant, Dominic hurried out and scanned the street. No Hannah. No Julia. As he neared the entrance, something on the ground caught his eye. He bent down. There it was, the card he had given her. Wet, edges softened by the rain, but still legible. His chest tightened. Did she throw it away? Or, did it fall without her knowing? He looked around once more, still no sign of her. Dominic clenched the card and walked inside. Sitting at the same table, he ordered food without emotion. Just rice and chicken, he said quietly when the waitress asked. He placed the damp card on the table and stared at it, his mind divided. One voice whispered, she left on purpose. She never intended to call. Another argued, she lost it. She's still waiting for you. Far away, Hannah reached into Julia's clothes to check on the card, and froze. It was gone. Her heart raced. She searched Julia's tiny clothes, her own wrapper, the ground around her. Nothing. Tears filled her eyes. No, no, it can't be, she cried softly. God finally sent someone to help me, and I lost it. She clutched Julia close. He promised to come for us, to keep us safe. And now I have no way to reach him. Her body shook as she whispered apologies to her baby. I'm so sorry, Julia. Mommy lost it. I lost our only chance. But then a thought struck her. Maybe it dropped on the bus. Or maybe at the restaurant. The bus was long gone, but the restaurant? Yes, she remembered the street, the table, the door. She had to try. Wrapping Julia securely, Hannah hurried off, whispering prayers under her breath. Please, God. Let it still be there. Exhausted, she boarded another bus. Every stop made her heart pound faster. Finally, she reached the area. At that exact moment, Dominic finished his meal. He cleaned the car gently with a tissue, sighed, and walked out. His driver opened the car door. Back to the office, Dominic said. The black SUV pulled away, just as Hannah arrived at the restaurant. She missed him by seconds. Breathless, she rushed inside, scanning the room. Everything looked the same, but the card was nowhere in sight. She checked the table, bent down to search underneath. Nothing. Excuse me, she asked a waitress in a shaky voice. Did anyone find a small card here? The waitress shook her head. No, madam. We cleaned everything. Nothing like that. Hannah's eyes welled up. She walked out, Julia crying softly in her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Our only chance is gone." She had no idea how close she'd been. That night, Hannah returned to the broken shell of an unfinished building. With no windows or doors, the cold air seeped in. She laid down old clothes for Julia to sleep on. As her daughter rested, Hannah sat awake, staring at the empty ceiling. God, I don't want my baby to grow up like this, she whispered through tears. Please help us. Her thoughts drifted to Dominic, his kindness, his eyes, his words. And then to the card she had lost. She pressed her hands to her chest and sighed. Maybe I'll never see him again. But before sleep overtook her, she made a quiet decision. I'll go back to the same spot where he found me. Maybe, just maybe, he will pass there again. The night was long and harsh. Mosquitoes bit, the wind howled, Julia cried. Yet Hannah held on. By dawn, she was already awake. She washed Julia with a little water, dressed her neatly, and smiled. We'll be okay, my child. I promise. With the money Dominic had given, food wasn't the problem. But today wasn't about eating, it was about waiting. About hope. So Hannah walked back to the same corner where Dominic had first stopped for her. She stood quietly, baby tied to her back, watching every black SUV that passed. Meanwhile, at Dominic's mansion, the mood was completely different. It was a day of joy. His younger brother, Silam, was returning home after 17 years in Atlanta. Dominic had cancelled all office work, determined to make it special. He had already sent his driver to the airport, reminding him, "Don't be late." Inside the house, preparations were in full swing. Dominic instructed the chef, make fried rice, jollof, grilled chicken, goat meat, and don't forget pounded yam. My brother loves pounded yam. The chef smiled. Don't worry, sir. Everything will be ready. Dominic then called 3 of his closest friends. Silam is arriving today. Come, let's welcome him. Laughter filled the compound, music played softly. Dominic stood on the balcony, looking out with joy. This is a good day, he whispered. But far away in the city, Hannah was still standing at the roadside, tired eyes, hopeful heart, watching, waiting, praying that one of those passing black SUVs might carry the man who had promised to save her. Do you want me to continue rewriting the next part of the story, Dominic's reunion with his brother and how it eventually connects back to Hannah, in the same style so you have the entire sequence ready for narration? Here's the rewritten version of the transcript, natural, original, and narrator-friendly, while keeping the meaning, pacing, and structure intact. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Sir, this is too much. I can't accept all of this." Dominic held her gaze, his voice calm but firm. Take it. You need it. Hannah glanced down at Julia, still asleep in her arms, before pulling the bundle of money close to her chest. She lowered her head. "Thank you, sir. May God bless you." Dominic gave a small nod and a faint smile. But when he checked his wristwatch, his eyes widened. His important meeting had already started. The foreign partners were likely at his office waiting. He rose to his feet quickly. "I have a meeting this morning," he explained. "It'll run for about 3 hours." From his wallet, he pulled out a sleek business card with his name and number. Handing it to her, he said, "Call me after that. I'll come meet you and take you and your baby somewhere safe." Hannah held the card delicately, almost like it was made of gold. She wanted to tell him she didn't even own a phone, but her lips stayed sealed. Instead, she simply whispered, "Thank you, sir." In her mind, she was already planning, maybe she could pay someone to make the call when the time came. Dominic gave her one last look. "I'll be waiting for your call." Then he walked out of the restaurant. Hannah sat quietly, Julia in one arm, the card in the other. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. After a while, she carefully folded the card and tucked it into a tiny pocket sewn inside Julia's clothes. She patted it once to make sure it was secure, then pulled Julia closer as she stepped outside. The baby's blanket slipped slightly, and as Hannah adjusted it, the card slipped to the ground without her noticing. It landed by the restaurant door, dampened by the wet pavement. By now, the rain had stopped. The sun peeked through the clouds as Hannah slowly made her way to a public bus, returning to the same corner where Dominic had first found her. She sat by a small wooden bench outside the shop where she had begged that morning. The shopkeeper wasn't around, but the spot was dry. She thought to herself, "I'll wait here until it's time to call. Then I'll pay someone to help me." But the card was gone, and she didn't know it. At noon, Dominic wrapped up his meeting. The foreign guests had left, everything had gone smoothly, but he wasn't smiling. He checked his phone, no missed calls. 5 hours had already passed. His brows furrowed. Why hasn't she called? Did she forget? Or, maybe she never intended to. His chest tightened at the thought, but then he shook his head. No, she hadn't looked like someone pretending. She looked broken, desperate, terrified. He remembered how she clung to her child, how she cried while eating. He sighed, staring at his phone again. Still nothing. He tried to refocus on work, but his mind was restless. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Hannah sat under the shade, waiting patiently, baby in her arms, with no clue the card was gone. Later, Dominic got into his SUV. He sat silently for a moment, lost in thought, before telling his driver, "Take me back to that restaurant from this morning. The one with the woman and her baby." The driver nodded and pulled into traffic. Dominic stared out the window, his mind racing. What if she tried to call but couldn't? What if something happened to her? When they arrived, he stepped out quickly, scanning the area. No Hannah. No baby. Nothing. As he walked toward the restaurant entrance, something on the ground caught his eye. He bent down, it was the card he had given her. Wet. The edges ruined by the rain. Still readable, but fragile. His heart sank. Did she throw this away? Or, did it fall without her knowing? He looked around again, still no sign of her. Clutching the card, he stepped inside and sat at the same table they had shared earlier. When the waitress came, he barely managed, just rice and chicken. As he waited, he placed the card on the table, staring at it. His thoughts battled, one voice saying she had abandoned it, another saying she had simply lost it. He couldn't decide which to believe, but one thing was certain, he couldn't stop thinking about that woman and her child. Far away, Hannah decided it was finally time to call Dominic. She opened Julia's tiny pocket to take out the card, her hands froze. It wasn't there. Her heart dropped. She searched frantically through Julia's clothes, her own wrapper, even the ground around her. Nothing. Tears filled her eyes. No, no, this can't be happening. She clutched Julia tightly. God finally sent someone kind to help us, and now I've lost the only way to reach him. Her chest ached. She thought of his gentle words, his kindness, the food, the money. Now all of it felt like it was slipping away. She whispered to Julia, "I'm so sorry, my baby. I lost it. I lost our chance." But then a thought sparked, maybe I dropped it at the restaurant. I remember the street, the table. Maybe it's still there. Hope renewed, she quickly tied Julia to her back and set off, praying silently. "God, please let me find it." She boarded a yellow bus heading in that direction. Each stop made her heart beat faster. Finally, she arrived and hurried down the familiar road. Inside the restaurant, Dominic finished his meal, wiped the damp card with a tissue, sighed, and stepped outside. His driver opened the door, and he slid into the car. "Back to the office," he ordered. As the SUV pulled away, Hannah was only a few steps away, hurrying toward the entrance. She never saw his face through the tinted glass, and he never saw hers. By the time she reached the door, he was gone. She walked in, breathing hard, eyes scanning everywhere. The table was spotless. No card. No trace. She bent to check underneath, then approached a waitress. "Excuse me, did anyone find a card here?" Her voice trembled. The waitress shook her head. "No, ma'am. We cleaned everything. Nothing like that." Hannah's tears spilled over. She stepped back outside, Julia crying in her arms, and broke down herself. She had been so close, seconds away from finding him again, and now, her chance was gone. That night, Hannah and Julia slept on the cold floor of an unfinished building. Broken walls, no windows, only the wind and mosquitoes for company. She laid Julia on a bundle of old clothes and watched her sleep, her tiny hand resting on her arm. With tears in her eyes, Hannah whispered, "God, I don't want my child to grow up like this. Please, help us." She thought of Dominic, his face, his kindness, the way he spoke to her.